Welcome to the Good Shepherd and the Child podcast, where we explore the spirituality of the Christian child through the method of the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd. I am your host, Carrie Mecki Lozano, with my dear friend Anna Hurdle as my co-host. Today we welcome Rebekah Rojcewicz on the podcast to discuss Chapter 2 of the Religious Potential of the Child for the 6 to 12-year-old, where we really dive into the concept of the mystery of time. Rebekah is a catechist and a formation leader in the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd. She completed her training in CGS in 1981 in Rome with Dr. Sofia Cavalletti and Gianna Gobbi. She has translated several of their books and articles from Italian to English, and she has also written and edited various other books that are part of our CGS core texts. Rebekah is a catechist at her parish St. Patrick Catholic Church, as well as with the Missionaries of Charity atrium in Memphis, Tennessee. She serves CGSUSA in many capacities, as well as on the international board for the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd, the Concilio. I hope you enjoy.
Hello and welcome to the podcast. Today we are in for such a special treat in that our guest is Rebekah Rojcewicz. Rebekah, did I say your name correctly?
Yes.
So that is the first question of the hour.
Right.
Or close enough.
Right.
I know many of you are familiar with Rebekah. Either possibly you've heard her speak, but you've certainly read her book, Life in the Vine, or you've perhaps seen her name as the primary translator on many of our primary sources from Italian to English. Rebekah, I did not prepare a formal biography, but would you just briefly introduce yourself?
Sure.
To those who know you?
Okay. Well, I'm one of the senior members of our Catechesis of the Good Shepherd community at this point, having gone to Rome in 1979 to 1981 to study Catechesis of the Good Shepherd. And I was already a trained in experience, 5 years experience, which is just a drop in the bucket as a Montessori primary teacher. And I was in Rome for 2 years, and then I came back to the States and began my work at first in a Montessori school that had the atrium as its heart, and stayed there for 16 years. But with having children of my own in that period, I could no longer do both. So I was just doing the catechesis work. And I've done it ever since. I did move to a new city about 25 years ago. And here in Memphis, I have my parish atrium, which is a Sunday morning model, but I also this is the 10th year that I do the atrium at the Missionaries of Charity, Mother Teresa's sisters, on Saturdays. So I've continued to be in the atrium, which Sofia and Gianna model for us always, that no matter what else we get involved in, be it writing books, translating books, whatever, that best source is always to remain with the children. So I'm very blessed that health-wise I've been able to do that. I was just there this morning, in fact. So yeah.
One day I want to hear more about your work in your atrium with the Missionaries of Charity. So one day we'll have to have that conversation.
Okay. I'd love to.
Rebekah, the last episode, I spoke a little bit about when you first translated RPC2, and it existed as a manuscript, but it had not been published yet.
Right.
And at that point in time, you and Donna had held an event at the Good Shepherd Center, and you read to us for a week. It was beautiful. You would read a segment of the book, and you would add commentary as you went along, and then we would discuss it. And so that was my introduction to that book.
Yes.
forever. I just hear your voice, as I said before, when I read it. It's like you're still reading to me.
Thank you.
Perhaps we can use that experience as like our jumping off point for today's episode in the work that you had to think about in order to do these translations. As we talked about before, it wasn't just a clear Italian to English translation. One has to know the heart of the work in order to make these translations. So can you talk a bit about that?
I did learn early on when Sofia, the first book Sofia ever asked me to translate came as quite a shock, because I went to Italy barely knowing how to order a coffee, and I had to learn the language, and I did over those 2 years to a degree, but I certainly did not consider myself a master of the language. And I came home, got married, I had actually just had my second child, and she was an infant. And one day the postman came and handed me a big fat package, and I wasn't expecting anything, but I went in and I opened it up. It was from Sofia, and she was sending me the manuscript of what was originally called The History of Salvation, now called The History of the Kingdom of God, Part 1, Creation to Parousia. But there's this big fat manuscript and a little note on it. In her terrible handwriting, she just said, "I would like for you to translate this." And it was a tremendous shock, because I was, A, not a master of the language, and B, I was a very busy young mother, a mother of young children. I wasn't so young, but I had 2 very young children. But at the same time, I had that sense of, oh, but what a gift it would be to be able to do that, to learn what I need to learn, to be able to do that. But then one of my questions was, why did she ask me? She has other much more scholarly former students that she could have asked. And what I came to that ended up being a greater, I don't know, compliment really, or meant more to me, is that she trusted my understanding of the work, understood the essentials, understood the child. And she trusted that more than if I were a professional translator. And that was a huge lesson. It was a very long and difficult process. More than once, I wrote Sofia and said, "This is going too slowly. You probably need to ask someone else." And every time I did that, she would write back and say, "No, I want you to do it." So it took, until it was actually in print, it took 8 years. That's how long that process was. So it was a tremendous gift to me to be able to do that eventually. And then, as you know, the title changed. Changed to History's Golden Thread, and then it changed to The History of the Kingdom of God, Part 1. But that process of translation, I came to respect so much, because I realized if you're translating Sofia Cavalletti, it's not enough to be a master of the grammar and the vocabulary of Italian. So anyway, it was a tremendous gift.
A gift to us all.
Yeah, definitely. And then so you translated the RPC2 that we now have.
Well, I did, but what happened with that one, whatever I was already engaged in, Tina Lillig called me one day and said, "We need to get it into English. Will you translate it?" And having spent 8 years on one book, I said, "Tina, I can't do it quickly enough right now. I have other things I've got to also do." I said, "Perhaps you could even consider getting a professional Italian translator, and then I'll do the second draft. So she said, actually, I do know a young man. His name is in the book. We certainly gave him credit, Alan Perry. And she asked him, would he be interested in doing this? I think he was working on his doctorate and he needed that, on his resume or whatever. So I said, well, why don't you do the first 2 chapters and send it to me, and then I can get a feel for how we're going to be able to work together. And I certainly don't want to denigrate him or his abilities, but when he sent it, the first 2 chapters, for me, it was almost unrecognizable as the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd. So it has nothing to do with his inability. What it has to do with is that this work, and therefore what you say about this work, is so rooted in experiencing it, understanding the spirit behind it. So it did give me a much more healthy self-respect that where I lacked in what you might call academic prowess with the language, I had and could make up for it in understanding. But as every other translation I've done, project I've done, it is the gift of going so deeply into her profound truths that she's lifting up. So, and we never exhaust those truths by reading it once. So I think we all go back again and again and again to those sources.
Right.
Yeah. I feel like every time that I've read any of Sofia's work, when I read it the first time, it's like, yeah, you're learning the language that time. So you're not really absorbing the content. It takes the second read for me to start absorbing the content.
Right. And it's worth the work. It is so.
When we first read these primary sources, often we are reading them with an eye and with the spirit for, I want it all.
Exactly.
I just want, I want I want it all. I want to be filled with this knowledge and with this spirit. So as we continue the work, I think we give ourselves permission to slow down.
Yes.
And to just read a little bit at a time.
Right.
And to fully think about what is being said, coupled with the experience of being with children. How do I know this to be true? This is not just something that I'm reading a theory. It's not theoretical. Right. I have actually seen this in the atrium.
Yeah.
Right. Which goes perfectly with what we're talking about today in regards to time and needing time.
Right.
So you said, Rebekah, that chapter in RPC2, chapter 2 on the mystery of time, that was a very difficult chapter to translate. Why was that?
Yes, extremely difficult, both for the language she uses. It does, on first glance, it reads like not a master's thesis, but a doctoral dissertation. And she holds, the language she uses, that she does not hold back. So my concern first was, can I do this justice in translating it? But my second concern was, oh dear, having read chapter 1, where she goes back to the level 1 child and the most essential nature, their religious nature, is so beautiful, so readable. And then I thought, people are going to get to this next chapter and go, wait a minute, this is not what I bargained for. This is too philosophical. It's too academically rich, and put it aside. But it is necessary because the subject is so great. And most people, I think, do not associate the title, The Mystery of Time, with having anything to do with religious education of children. It sounds very esoteric, very philosophical. What does that have to do? And then we read, even in this chapter, I love the very first line. St. Augustine once said that when no one asked him about time, he knew what it was. But when someone asked him about it, he did not know how to respond. So, what a beautiful way to use St. Augustine, one of the greatest fathers of the church. And yet he says, yeah, I can't explain it. So we're up before something truly great, truly mysterious, but also truly essential for our life of faith. And most people do not think that that would have anything to do with children. Why does it? And for me, that comes back to this very definitive statement about what is the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd, the meeting ground between two mysteries, the mystery of God and the mystery of the child. And if you start from there, then you can never separate the mystery of God from the mystery of the child, because the child is the one who leads us to the most essential mysteries of our faith, mysteries of God, right? So if we think about time just as a subject, the mystery of time, then it's easy to see why many people would say, what's that got to do with religion? But if you look at the mystery of the child and respect the mystery of the child, and Maria Montessori helped us see this, Sofia underscored it in the arena of religion, that for the child, the second plane child, beginning around 6 to 7 years of age, the greatest religious need and capacity is to explore the mystery of time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a great example of this catechesis. She has been led by the child. She was able to meet the child in each plane of development so beautifully because she was also a scholar of the Bible, of the liturgy. And so she was able to bring the two together. I know one of her greatest sources, she was greatly influenced by the work of Abraham Heschel, and particularly his book called The Sabbath, in which he talks about this mystery of time, and particularly its importance in the meaning of Sabbath. Where all week long we're in this relationship with time, which is more scheduled. We have things we have to do. We do them. We're more earthbound naturally to get our responsibilities taken care of. But Sunday, Sabbath, Saturday, the Sabbath is a completely different realm of experience. It's an encounter with Him, with God. And so many things that are in part of our weekly to-do list have no part of Sabbath because we're in that different realm, if you will. And many people read Heschel and I was deeply impressed. I love the book, The Sabbath, have read it many times. But what's also important for us as catechists to understand, Sofia didn't start with Heschel's beautiful thoughts on the mystery of time and apply them to the children. She saw how engaged the second plane child was with history, with biblical history, hence the mystery of time. And then she drew from Heschel. She sharpened her perception. She sharpened her ability to put into practice with the children through Heschel and others. But it was inspired by the child.
Right. That's so important for us to think about in regards to it's not these really amazing theological, philosophical ideas and teachings that she had discovered that she wanted to pour into the child, but
Exactly.
It just always started with the child and what they revealed to her. Yeah.
I always, in this discussion, I do always want to go back to, and I know most anyone listening to this podcast knows this because we tell it at every opportunity, but that her own beginning in this work was, sitting down with 3 early second plane boys in her studio, her living room, and telling us as adults she had no idea what she was doing with children. And she said, I did only what I knew how to do, which is open the Bible and begin to read. And they, as you know, began to read from Genesis. And it was in that real encounter with these 3 6 to 7-year-old boys, the depth of their engagement was all it took for her to say, this really meets a need. This is good food for these children. But then it's also important to remember that she didn't then say goodbye to the boys and sit down and write an entire syllabus of the content of the atrium, right? It took them, she and Gianna Gobbi, years to discover the content, the subjects, and to refine them. But it became very clear to her in the earliest years of this experimentation, this search, it became very clear to her that exploring the mystery of time and therefore biblical history is crucial, a crucial need and capacity of the second plane child. So again, where did it come from, this focus on the history of the kingdom of God? It came from the children of the second plane.
I've thought about this several times, Rebekah and Carrie, but through the years. But just now, when you were saying, she saw this capacity within the children that she was struck by, but yet she didn't go write a syllabus.
Right.
At the same time, however, she did recognize it, and today I was struck by how many busy academians would have just got it done and moved on.
Exactly.
But this was a pivotal moment for her.
Right. And then to me, that's also reflected in the fact that realizing how engaged these 3 boys were, again, they were in what we would call level 2 in terms of, the stage of the atrium they would have been ready for. Again, a regular person, the average person, would have said, children love the Bible. We're going to start reading the Bible. The minute they can read, we're going to read the Bible and study the Bible. But she didn't do that. She continued to ponder it and said, why were they so engaged in Genesis? And what she came to was they love the mystery of time. They love thinking back to the very beginning of everything. And they love the imagery of creation. But she went further than that and said, but what is the Bible? What is the most essential thing to grasp and experience about the Bible? And then it was that it is the story of the history of salvation, that there is a golden thread that connects it, that it's a plan that's unfolding in time. So in other words, and she depended on Gianna Gobbi because Gianna had that Montessori knowledge and experience to say, you have to first find the big picture that tells the theme of it all, the purpose in it all, where it's all headed. And then there'll be plenty of time in level 3 when they're older in that second half of the second plane. There'll be plenty of time to read the flood or Noah, Abraham or Exodus or all of that. So even that was a process to realize. So what does the second plane child need first? That big picture.
Right.
It's interesting because, we think about time. We think about, orienting the children to time, like you're saying, the level 2, to give them the big picture, and then, it will spiral over the next 6 years from there. But then there's also this mystery of time in regards to the time that is necessary for a heart to fall in love.
Yes.
You know, the time that is necessary for fermentation to happen, right?
Exactly.
And Abraham Heschel also gives us that really beautiful quote in Sabbath. The higher goal of spiritual living is not to amass a wealth of information, but to face sacred moments. Yes. I love that.
And so we always come back to characteristic number 3 of the 32 points. If you can only say one thing about the atrium, what is it? The atrium is a place of prayer. And prayer is between the child and God, and it is completely personal to the child and their journey, their timing. There's that word again. And so everything is entrusted to God's timing and the child's developmentally, the child's own internal timing.
Yeah. Not expecting a child to be able to regurgitate certain information by a certain age or even be interested in certain things,
Right.
want to must see certain presentations. Like, it's that relinquishing control.
Exactly.
There's a trust in God's time, trusting the time that interweaves God and the child that we have no part in. Very hands open, very trusting, very humble before all of that.
Right.
That mystery of time in that regards as well.
And I know, quote, I'm preaching to the choir, not just to the two of you, but to all catechists. We know this so well, but I think it is bears repeating every time we think about or talk about the catechesis, that it really does start with a deep trust in the child as made by God, having an inner teacher. And if that's your starting point, you're going to be much more aware, observant of the child's responses as your guiding thing to know, what do they need next? What are they ready for? What is the food, the precise goods, as Merton says, that are needed here? But it keeps that focus squarely on that Montessori belief in or articulation of her finding that the child is born with a spiritual embryo, an inner teacher, and being always respectful of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Rather than the empty vessel that we need to pour into.
Exactly.
Having a deep respect and dignity for the child that they already are all they need to be at this moment. We are just creating an environment that allows them to live out the spiritual and religious and relationship life that they already have with God. Right. But that also requires time. That requires time. Like, this is why, we talk about how important it is to have 2-hour atrium sessions, because there should be enough time for someone to sit in that enjoyment, to sit and have an encounter, which doesn't happen immediately. Like, I always feel like when a child walks in my atrium, they kind of pinball for a little bit, because It's like they have to get the energy out or maybe hit all the boxes for a minute, and you let them pinball. And then if they have enough time, they can sink into that deeper work, that deeper growth. Right. And you see this in Montessori classrooms with their 3-hour work cycles, right? The longer time they're able to be in there, you'll see that lull, that false fatigue before they sink into something really deep. But if you don't have enough time, you never will see that.
Right.
Time no longer becomes a mystery.
Exactly. Sofia, says in the religious potential too about the 6 to 12 child. She said, the question is, and I always loved the fact that, true to her Hebrew roots in her university years, how can we attend to the telling of history so that the mystery of time is not reduced to mere chronology. And again, that's so in tune with the child. Ricoeur was another one one of her teachers, that she said, time becomes human time when it is narrated.
Oh.
No time thought would there be if not for the tale. So again, at every level, it is following the child and following the Bible, the richness of the Bible. Another, to me, very important statement to have, engraved on your soul. Again, a question, how can our tradition, specifically the Bible, respond to the need of the child to be oriented to the reality of time? So again, not a definition, not a catechism format, but this much larger goal of, in fact, Sofia once said, the greatest goal of religious education is an orientation to reality. And of course, that's a word that so many adults think, reality, get real. It's almost a negative, disclaimer on anything that's mysterious or spiritual or emotional or anything, that everything comes down to what you can see and touch and what you need to get on in this world. But she uses that term, orientation to reality, and that is so multi-leveled for Sofia and Gianna and the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd. So.
I think we see, especially with our content in Catechesis of the Good Shepherd with levels 2 and level 3, this juxtaposition of reality, something that we always are being grounded in reality. Oftentimes with our presentations, the geography is the grounder.
Right.
This is a place where we can go, and we can see, and we can touch. It exists. So that is the grounding in reality. And then that is paired with, the mysterious.
Right. And that's what, we know so well. That's one of the greatest religious characteristics of the younger child, that they are very metaphysical. So they simultaneously can enjoy, perceive the tangible elements of, quote, reality, but simultaneously they can sense that which transcends what we're looking at and seeing and touching and tasting and so forth. And this tremendous religious capacity, and Sofia, of course, especially when she talks about the education to wonder, reminds us that this is not a given. They may have a gift for it in early childhood, but if it's not nurtured, it's not going to survive. And when you come to the mystery of time and history and what we're living for or looking forward to it, if you have lost all sense of wonder, how are you going to care what's coming in the parousia?
That's great, Rebekah. I love Rachel Carson, her book, A Sense of Wonder, and she talks about how it's so important that a child retain his or her sense of wonder.
Yeah.
And how do we do that? What would you give as a suggestion to help a child maintain their sense of wonder?
Well, at the risk of sounding too negative, it's the first thing to me is a negative, what not to do. And to me, it is the detrimental practice of too much screen time. Really. I've seen it in my oldest daughter is a Montessori directress teacher in New Jersey, and she has 3 children, 3 of my 5 grandchildren. And the most tangible difference I've seen in her and her children is that they have very limited access to screens. And so they don't get bored. Not that they don't sometimes want to watch a video or something, of course, but they know how to be outside and find interesting things to do. I think that to me is the basic. Sofia, I know in Religious Potential 1, when she talks about the education to wonder, she starts with what not to do. And, she says, serve children good food, but not too much of it. So not even too much good food, not even too much of the good news at one time. So overfeeding is one of those cautions. But I think for us in this culture, I think it really is more often the amount of screen time. So there's just not space left for that fascination with the natural world or with basic things like cooking and doing things, experimenting with things in the real world.
What I hear so much in what you're saying with both of those practical tips is time again, because
Exactly.
Time to be bored, time to sit and wonder, well, what should I do next? Time to sit and engage with nature, those kind of things. And again, it is time that will lead to the deeper sense of wonder, but also time in the rich food, but little of it. Because if we give too much rich food without enough time in the middle to let things ferment and grow within us, I imagine the bread that we talked about before and what we do in the atrium, when you give too much yeast, it's going to be a very different type of bread. Mm-hmm. So rich food, but little of it has this essence of time as well. That is so important in order to let each little seed percolate inside of our hearts.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So this also points us to what we're going to speak about next in regards to the spiral method and how it is so necessary, this rich food, but little of it, right? We give little bites and then we come back around later and we give a little bit more and a little bit more. We do not give all of it all at once. We use this beautiful spiral method. So I would love for us to continue that conversation in our next episode. But Rebekah, I think that you wanted to close us off with a really beautiful quote from RPC2.
Yes, and it's really the way she closes chapter 2 in the religious potential to, having talked already about an orientation to reality. She's saying now, in order to find oneself at home in reality, a person must be oriented in time and history, especially from the time of the second plane of development. The biblical message, so solidly rooted in history, has shown itself to be a perfectly suited tool for this need. Therefore, it does not surprise us that the child reaches for this tool with such total involvement. In the magnificence and wholeness of its development, biblical history has proven to correspond exactly to the spiritual and psychological needs of the child. Thus, it serves as a fit instrument for liberating the child's interior energies. And I would add to that only one thing, which is to remember that after many, many years of their work with children and to learn what children most need, to learn what is the most essential food for each developmental period, that only after many years was Sofia and Gianna able to say, what are the three greatest needs and capacities, religious capacities of childhood? And this, we all should know this, but to me, it's important to remember the first two. The first one, of course, is the need and capacity for relationship and to celebrate that relationship with God. The second one, which again manifested itself in early childhood, was the need and capacity to explore the mystery of life. Hence the parables of the kingdom, the grain of wheat. And then the third one does not emerge until this age of the second plane child. And it is this need to explore the mystery of time. So we remember that, we hold on to its importance, both for the 6 to 9 child and then in a slightly different way with the 9 to 12 child. We're ministering to that need and capacity.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I look forward to continuing this conversation.
Thank you, Rebekah.
Thank you.
Thank you all for listening to this week's episode of the Good Shepherd and the Child podcast. I have a few things in our show notes to help you out. Rebekah referred to characteristic number 3 from our 32 points of reflection for the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd. So I went ahead and copied the characteristic into our show notes so that you could read it there. In this characteristic, it starts off saying, "The atrium is a community in which children and adults live together a religious experience." So go check out our show notes to read the rest of that characteristic. There is also links for some books. I put all of our core texts for the second plane child for the level 2 and level 3. If you would like to purchase those books, there's links in our show notes to get your hands on those, especially the book that we'll be referring to a lot throughout this season, which is The Religious Potential of the Child for the 6 to 12-year-old. I put a link also for 2 specific episodes. One is on the mystery of time with Autumn Domain. And then I also put a link for episode 57, which is about celebrating the life of Tina Lillig. During the month of February, we remember our first national director, Valentina Lillig, and we honor her legacy by encouraging generosity to the Tina Lillig Memorial Fund. The mission of this fund is to support the growth and development of the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd through catechist formation, missionary outreach, and the work of the United States Association of the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd. It is to these ends that the Tina Lillig Memorial Fund offers a source of financial aid in the form of partial scholarships to applicants who find paying the full tuition of courses to be a hardship. So if you or your community needs scholarship or grant support for formation, please visit our website and apply. I'll put a link in our show notes for that. The next deadline for applications will be April 30th of 2026. We also really want to encourage anybody who'd be interested in donating to the Tina Lillig Memorial Fund to support these scholarships. There's a link for that as well in our show notes. Thank you for all of our donors who have already generously supported this fund and made formation courses possible for catechists all across the United States and the world. I want to remind all of our listeners to please submit questions to our podcast listener questions. We are really excited to ask our guests these questions. So if you have an issue or a question about this work, go ahead and submit it, and we would love to answer it on the podcast. This podcast is sponsored by the United States Association of the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd. We would like to thank all of our members because it is you that is making this podcast possible. If you would like to become a member, or if you would like to learn more about the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd, please go to CGSUSA.org. Thank you all for listening. We will see you in 2 weeks. Go and fall more deeply in love with God.